Hi, on this video, I'd like to demonstrate how one could cut certificates from their IT infrastructure for devices that are part of the BMS or the building automation system, but are also in an IT OT converged network, which is just a long-winded way of saying a network that is managed by the enterprise IT department, but also has a number of BAS and other network devices that don't fit the standard IT enterprise profile for a network device. So, um, first of all, this here is a server that is part of the same domain, vtech.com. In a previous video, we were able to create host name records fairly easy in this server, which happens to be the one of the Active Directory domain controllers, a DNS server, and also happens to be our authority, our certificate authority. Um, so we need a certificate authority in order to have a root certificate that guarantees that all our certificates in the system are valid and guarantee the identity of different servers, clients, and other network devices. Now, Active Directory has been around for a long time, and they have actually done a really good job. Um, and they do this for any computer or server or domain controller that enrolls in identity services. Um, so these are roles again that have to be installed. If one would want to um, install the role to do um, to be able to work with certificate and manage certificate services, here's a role that one would need to install, right? And these are different features in that role that one can install as well. So, and their tools, there's a number of certificate tools. Um, this CERT SRV, and there's also CERT. Um, all right, that went well. We can get those components also from here. Here's our issued certificates. So there's a different templates to create certificates in Victory. Um, you can see that a number of these certificates have already been created as I install different roles or features. Um, Others are certificates that we've created in order to enroll our different BIS services into the IT network. So, um, in order for us to be able to get certificates and get devices enrolled, once someone's created the correct certificate template based on an existing certificate template. For example, in this case, we're dealing with mostly web servers, or that's the type of certificate we want to used the most. Because, for example, in the case of Niagara instances or Eclipse controllers or any of these newer controllers, we really want to validate um, their HTTPS endpoint. Um, Although there are other reasons why one would want to use certificates like code signing and things like that. But the main reason in these types of cases, in my opinion, would be to enroll the web services of these devices into certificate management. Um, so if we look at any properties of these certificates, if we go and look at, for example, this certificate, which is the one that I use for everything, not just Niagara instances, but also Eclipse controllers. There's most of this stuff can just stay as default. We don't need to set this because we want to set this later on when we create each individual certificate. But there's one thing we do have to set, which is which groups and which computers in the domain can actually enroll other computers or devices in certificate management. Essentially, we give access to those hosts on in the domain to be able to create certificates off of this template because we cannot create these certificates directly in the certificate authority server. So, with that being said, um, we can go to this other server on the network, and from here we can say cert lm. Oh, all right, fine. That MSC. All right, it's much better. So there's a number of different ways to do certificates from here. I will show you what you would want to do if you wanted to create a certificate signing request first and then have that signed. I think we would need to do. So we could go to this web service that the certificate, if you notice, this is the domain name for the certificate authority server, not the one where we're on right now. And from here, we could request a certificate. Before we do that, so typically in the past, the Internet Information Services, which is the web service native to Windows servers, is where we would want to go because for web server certificates, Microsoft thought this would be the place where you'd do that. Um, Server certificates, create certificate request. You'd have to fill all this stuff out, PKI enrollment in domain and directory, in Active Directory domain services. So we're not going to do it this way. But if you were to do it that way, then you'd have to come here, request a certificate, um, advanced certificate request, and you'd copy paste stuff from the certificate signing request document you created earlier into here. It's mess. And so we're not going to do any of that because this is such a much easier way to do this since this server and any computer on the Active Directory, enrolled in Active Directory in this enterprise system, would have had a client authentication certificate created, and it would have had the certificate authority's root certificate installed into all the trust stores in the browsers in the computer, and insert and the certificate local management snapping console of those devices. uh, we basically don't need to do anything for those browsers and those computers to have access to the root certificate that signs the certificate we're going to create. So these are certificates we've already created. We're just going to go through the process of creating a new one. We'll request a new certificate. This is the thing that's different. Um, we're going to use the Active Directory enrollment policy. We are going to use this template. And now is since we would have had a chance to pre add defaults here, right? A bit in the template, but it didn't make sense, and because it's always going to be a different domain name and so on. So this one's going to be CY top because it's on the top rack. There we go. That's the domain name uh, for this certificate, and everything else really can stay pretty much the same because again, we've already predefined all those fields in the certificate template that's hosted in the certificate authority web server. So now we'll just go ahead and enroll, succeeded. Now the last part of this is we want to export this certificate. We do want to export with the private key. This is exactly all we need, and I'm only going to demonstrate an Eclipse controller today, but for Niagara instance, Niagara doesn't want PFX formatted certificates. It would like to have PEM type certificates. So one would have to go through the extra step of converting the that PFX certificate we're going to get now um, with into a .pem. But everything else would pretty much be the same. We would still need the private key and we would need a passphrase to protect that private key.